Yeah, just to give you a little bit of background. So Omniscient is a privacy preserving data collaboration platform. And we created the Omniscient platform very much in line with data clean rooms, and the things were starting to happen 5 years ago. Retail media started kicking off globally. Many different banks and financial institutions wanted to be able to source data in ethical ways without consumer privacy being an issue. And Omniscient, at that stage, when we were still in MVP stage, had this vision that we could help businesses collaborate on data, ensure that consumer privacy was secured, and that IP was protected in the data sharing process, because those two things are the two main things that seem to be at issue with most companies. It was very refreshing to see how many businesses actually wanted to share data in privacy compliant ways as well. So I'm just going to, I'm not sure if you're driving on that side or if I'm driving this presentation actually. Is it changing? Okay. So Omniscient's an award-winning privacy preserving data collaboration platform. We've enabled many businesses to collaborate through the platform, and I'll share some of those businesses with you in just a sec. And certainly South Africa was our launch pad, really, and there's more than 100 businesses in South Africa that have actually collaborated through the platform already. We are extending our services to international markets, but just the actual places that we have been included in, and this is what's so fascinating about creating a platform like this, is it wasn't just for media. What we set out to do as a business was to use data for good, and to actually enable certain things that people didn't have access to, like financial inclusion, is a 2 billion person problem globally. Omniscient really wanted to tackle that, and we believe that harnessing alternative data sets could really help people that were frankly getting quite dodgy loans and things like that at the time, or couldn't get proper credit from reputable institutions. We wanted to assist, and the only way that you could assist them was through data and their actual data footprints. So immediately in that came the struggle between how do you actually give somebody what they need and want, and how do you harness data, and how do you walk the privacy and ethics line in that during that opportunity. So just to give you a view of the businesses that are on the platform, this is not the exhaustive list, but it gives you a flavor for how many different sort of businesses and which sectors we're seeing participating in this actual data collaboration environment, and for all kinds of different purposes that we'll discuss in a moment. But as you can see, we've managed to secure relationships with many of the banks, financial institutions, retailers, bureaus, media platforms for all kinds of purposes. Now, all these businesses actually use our platform for very different reasons. So people joke and say we're like a data dating agency, you know, like it's not an open platform where the data sits and anybody can just partake in it. And Omniscient is not in control of those data assets, which is another important thing to note. So it's not like Facebook owns their own data. Omniscient is an enabler of these data owners to protect their PII and IP in data collaborations, and they choose very meticulously what they do with their data, when they actually work with another party, and how they work with that other party, right? Just want to see if that actually loads the next one. Sorry, I don't know if there's a delay. Oh, there you go. So as I mentioned before, our roots are in trying to address very pertinent global issues, health, financial inclusion, fraud, all kinds of things that can be solved through data sharing for the good of consumers, are things that we were born out of to tackle. Obviously, businesses want to use this sort of data or these sorts of applications as well. Now, globally, just to give you a view of financial inclusion, so I'm just giving you guys a view of how privacy-preserving tech can actually solve a big world issue. So globally, this is a massive problem of people that don't have credit records. They move from country to country. or they've never actually entered into having a credit card, but they've now got their own spuzzer shop and they're starting to build quite good revenue and started a good business, but they still can't get good credit. So they take bad credit and then repay loans that they shouldn't have to repay at those rates, right? So like you've got that scenario that actually runs through. In South Africa, that problem was a 21 million person problem, and we've already reduced it down to 13 million. And how have we done that, right? So we partnered with a business that is a bit of a rocket ship in the retail environment. You can just, you don't have to wonder too long who that might be. But the hypothesis we had was that consumers that actually have, your grocery spend data is something that you do recently and frequently, right? The same thing is everybody thought that these devices were the devices that would give the answer to solving financial inclusion. Now, said retailer had a couple of things. They never want to do bad to their customer. They are actually, as a crew, highly ethical crew that scrutinize everything and think deeply about everything that they actually do for the customer. So certainly from a playbook perspective, you couldn't find a better data owner that wanted to do the right things with data. And they wanted to make sure that privacy wasn't an issue at all. They wanted to make sure that they knew and understood if there was signal in the data and if the data could actually be used for this purpose before they even allowed it to be used. And then they wanted to make sure that from updating privacy, T's and C's and everything else, that they were very clear on how their consumer would be protected and how they'd be able to share this data with another party without sharing any personal information or without moving their data anywhere, so that the consumer's data is totally protected, right? And that was the remit and what we tackled with them, right? So I'm going to have to get into a little bit of technical detail to explain how the actual platform works. And just show you how the tech is applied, because I'm not the biggest techie in the world myself, but hopefully if I can manage to get this, we all will, because my wife always says I'm the one that they test things on in the family. The beauty about cryptography is that cryptography, as it turns out, cryptography has been used for a long time, hashing data, right? So many of you would have heard about hashing data, but you might not necessarily know all the detail about hashing data, but governments and banks and loads of institutions have used it as a protection for a long, long time. So essentially what hashing does is not like encryption. So it's not like you're encrypting something and then you can decrypt it or return it. But cryptography really helps in turning actual personal information into gobbledygook code that can't be turned back into that original information again, right? And hashing has been used in the past and people have sent each other hashed data. But the problem is if two parties send each other the hashed data to match data, they send each other in somebody's environment. So somebody's got hashed data and then they've got other things like this person plays paddle and buys groceries here or whatever. They've got different information. And then the other party joins their data on that hash. So yes, there's no personal information in that file, but that party could potentially actually re-identify that consumer in their environment based on the other information that's on in their file. So this actually required independent party actually applying algorithms and data to this without having the source data. Because part of what happened with some of the big media players in the world and the hashing space and some of the fallouts that have come from it is they both data owner and they apply the hashing principles, so they can actually reverse engineer the process, right? And you need independent parties like data clean rooms that can't reverse engineer that process because they don't have the source data, and the source data never comes into their environment. I know that's a little bit technical, but essentially crypto IDs are created, and with these crypto IDs between two businesses, you can actually connect data. But what the parties also wanted is they didn't want either party to actually have access to the actual data itself or park their data, because parties as fastidious and as really concerned they are about never letting personal information even leave their business, they also are wanting to protect the IP that they've built up in their data sets over a long, long period of time, right? And they want to get fair value for the use of that data. So what Omniscient did was we did two things to actually make an independent trust platform where parties can actually onboard their data without ever giving Omniscient or each other personal information at all. So party A and party B that want to actually engage with each other, personal information never leaves either of those environments. So if party A has your data, they are keeping your data. They're not sharing that with party B. But that both parties can use the desktop or server application that we provided, which for our business wasn't ideal because it means long onboarding processes, going through InfoSec, PrivSec with businesses, going through pen testing to make sure that the technology does what it does. All the things you would expect somebody to do with the technologies that they use if they're responsible. Our business has to go through very long cycles of those things and be tested and proven before they'll deploy that technology in their business. But once deployed in that business, they can hash the data and tokenize the data on-prem. What Omniscient does is we tokenize that data and actually change what that initial hash looks like on the way into the cloud as well to add additional security and opportunity and actually totally mitigate the opportunity of re-identification and actually apply certain other things that make it privacy compliant. So we deal with a gentleman in England called Robert Bond that's on the GDPR Council. And of course, most countries have taken their stance on personal information from GDPR. So most laws have kind of copied GDPR really and maybe made some nuanced changes and stuff like that. But when we went into that market, after being in other markets, they're definitely the toughest market. They've got a culture of scrutinizing everything. But he came away saying the onboarding process, data in Omniscient's hand isn't personal information at all, right? So the acts don't even apply onboarding data into the platform. So you can overlap data, build insights and stuff like that without ever sharing personal information, and that personal information can't be re-identified in Omniscient's hands. So you've got this environment where the data can go for people to come out with insights and things like that and build dashboards and all kinds of things. But of course, people also want to use that data to then deploy campaigns or plan campaigns or solve things like financial inclusion and stuff like that. But what a lot of businesses don't want to do is they don't want to change their T's and C's or go to consumers if there's no use in them doing that, because it takes a lot of internal resources to do those things. But you can actually build a business case in the platform and actually see if the data is good for that business case without ever giving somebody's personal information to somebody else. So essentially the data is aggregated but joinable, and we call those crypto IDs the ability to join data distinctly and know that you are joining data on people, and you know that that is data that actually matches, and those distinct matches are required for if anybody said to me tomorrow, if the pharmacy shared data with the oncology department and you shared it with somebody else and you could come up with a cure for cancer by actually joining data, everybody would want people to join data, right? Like as long as they keep your personal information out of it and you can't attach that insight to my person, right? So essentially, that's what this cryptographic process. Then the second part of this process was, how do we give parties the ability to run overlap analysis? Because that's usually the start of our opportunity. A bank wants to work with a retailer or with a media platform. So say, for instance, you could take Stream or DSTV's ability to show programming by their users, right? Like what programs do they like? And the bank wants to upload their data to go, I want to upload my data into this environment where I can't identify my customers, but I can certainly tell what programming schedule I should have against my customers. So can I actually look at that information and go, geez, like we can see that our guys watch mostly reality TV shows or TV shows about home renovations or whatever it might be, right? Like, so you could literally actually join that data, de-identified, no personal information leaving either party's space, to already inform how better to do targeting, as an example, or actually even attribution, right? So we'll get into the attribution side of things as well. But we put Power BI and Jupyter Notebooks in the platform for a reason. So no party joins their data to another party without actually them initiating it. So parties get into these agreements with each other that they're going to join data in the platform. Neither party shifts data to the other party. So don't physically move their data. and they can use Power BI for data visualization and Jupyter for AI ML capabilities to actually build models like lookalike models. Now, the lookalike models that you've heard of for Facebook and Google and stuff like that are not the same as the things that can get done in a data clean room and a privacy preserving data collaboration platform. Because all that they do is when you load your hash data into Meta or into Google, they look at people that kind of look like you based on the information that they have about you. So age, gender, maybe area that you live, if they've pinpointed your location, or groups and things that you join on. What we're talking about here is if a bank put their data next to a retailer and they said, actually, these are my best credit card behavioral data, and you put the retailer's data in there, this is how those users shop. The science in that model means if I then go after a lookalike audience for that, the retailer can, for instance, target consumers on your behalf based on the retail behavior that they see for your best customer, right? And that's had dramatic impacts on how people actually convert and actually get much, like, I'm going to show you a use case in a sec. It was in the public domain and they won an award for it. So it's easy for me to discuss just what that sort of ROAS looks like if you can get data together like that. But I just wanted to very briefly touch on getting it right and what the ethics and the trust looks like in this sort of scenario. Because even though Omniscient has created this capability, it's never our intent to magic away or circumvent privacy or compliance. It's to enable it for businesses that actually want to solve a problem, and then they still got to apply all these processes. Are you being transparent with your consent and the mechanisms that you use? What does sort of control and value look like? Are you offering clear benefits to the client off the back of that? Are you accountable for it? So what does your governance and audits and ethics checks and things like that look like? So all of these things need to be in place. And what's the purpose for the design? So these are the things that are playbooks for businesses now. So I was mentioning this earlier to some of the parties in this event, is that it's so encouraging for Omniscient to see just how serious businesses are about applying these filters before they do anything, right? And it is encouraging, for the consumer, actually. Not that the consumer is always immediately aware of just how diligent those businesses are. Most of the time, all you hear about is incidents, and we get jaded and think that everybody's just out to kind of get our data and use our data in foul ways, right? When actually it's like news reporting. You only hear the bad news, right? You never hear the good news. So in this instance, what we were able to do was actually onboard the grocery data, and the bank was able to actually run these ML AI capabilities across it to actually build a lookalike model. And then just to give you a view of what that did was it actually gave the bank an ability to actually speak to 3.2 million unbanked people that have never been banked before, right? And that actually have affordability levels. So if you think about even the ethics around credit lending, is like you shouldn't lend to people that aren't good to lend to, right? So why even advertise to people that aren't good to lend to, right? If you think about that. So the capability has enabled two things to apply there. Identify people that are good to lend to, and then only market to people that are good to lend to, right? And then also for your business, mitigate the opportunities to just spray and pray to a whole bunch of people without getting a good result off the back of that, right? So yeah, sorry, I know that I'm taking up some time, so I just want to actually talk about how that mechanism was done as well. So the other phenomenon that's actually come into play is retail media, obviously. So everybody in the room would, like the normal media platforms like Google and Facebook and Instagram and general publishers and stuff like that are obviously in play. But retail media is now a $170 billion business globally, right? And Amazon kind of leads the race with almost half or a third of that revenue. So they're making a lot. And they were the forerunner that actually cottoned onto the fact that if they've got a direct consumer relationship, amazing data, they could actually become a media platform and compete with the big entities. What's interesting, though, is that these big entities can also not irritate their client by sending their client personal messages, but they can put things into the normal media streams like Meta and Google and put that cohort in there. and advertise to them without them losing control of their customers' data and without them losing control of their own data. So personal information never even comes into it. So no personal information is in that realm, right? It's all done on cryptography, where the ad gets served on the crypto ID. So you know that that's a person that should get the ad, but you just don't know who that person necessarily is. And you can do it in environments where the consumer would expect it, that also has policies around advertising and who you advertise to, et cetera, in that space, right? The actual return on ad spend that they got from that campaign has been groundbreaking. So there was like a 728% ROAS on this campaign, and you can see the kind of effect it has. First-party data is not always going to have this result for everything. You actually have to find the first-party data and really curate the first-party data that really moves the needle. I can actually talk about many scenarios where Google or Facebook can do a good job because of what they see versus the first-party data owner, right? So you do have to know how to apply first-party data to the need of that advertiser so that it's a clear thing that concerns that advertiser, right? So if that advertiser worries about credit risk and lending to the right people, et cetera, then there's certain data sets that'll actually really help with that, and your advertising becomes no wastage and stuff like that. So you don't just apply any first-party data anywhere. It's not a first-party data fest will improve everything, right? It's because it won't. But where you do find the right signals and the right data, it can make massive differences to how you actually convert the customer. Yeah, but I'll stop there for now. I'm sure I took a little bit more airtime than I should have anyway. Maybe there's some questions.